Hello, everyone. Hello, welcome to the Comics Cube with me, Paul, and my friends Duy and Lamar. And today we are going to talk about The Flash, specifically The Flash, the Human Thunderbolt, which is a collection coming out November the 26th. And it is part of DC's DC Finest lines, which is paperback, relatively affordable collections of some of their most famous runs of comics. And The Flash, the Human Thunderbolt, contains the very first Barry Allen stories from Showcase number 4 all the way through to Flash number 123. And these are by John Broome and Carmine Infantino. And basically, today we're going to talk about how great they are and urge you to buy this collection because it really is fantastic comics. So, to start off with, I'm going to ask Duy and Lamar about the reputation of these comics, because these are the comics that the received wisdom is that these comics began the Silver Age of comics. This is like the separation point between the Golden Age with the Justice Society and the Human Torch and Namor and all that. And this is the Silver Age coming in, which of course eventually led into the Fantastic Four and Stan Lee and Kirby and Ditko doing their thing. So these are quite legendary comics, but do they deserve this legendary reputation? What do you think, Duy?
I don't. I think that they do deserve this reputation, but when I started reading it, I had this preconception of it, that it was dated and that it wasn't going to hold up. But having read it now, I do in fact think it deserves its reputation because the series is so much more insane than I would have ever thought it was. Like I'd read some of it before. Obviously, I believe it is a given that we have all read the big one, the big story at the end. But the comparison that I came up with was there's so much going on in these stories. It actually hits me as a more sanitized version of Stan Lee and Jack Kirby's Fantastic Four, where like just something is happening in every issue that is batshit crazy. And I just thought that was very perfect for the Silver Age, which is all about imagination, it's all about innovation, and it's all about creation.
Yeah. What do you think, Lamar? Does it deserve its reputation? Would you agree with Duy?
I I definitely agree. Because when you talk about the Silver Age, like getting jumped off, we tend to think of, just like one story, right? But when you talk about this Flash, a run, especially the early part of the run, there was just so much happening, like constantly, all the time, and these new ideas that we didn't see before. And you're and this is happening during a time where there's all kinds of like scientific developments and things happening in the world and all of that. And so there's a little bit that energy is actually in this comic. Like you can see it. There's just all different kinds of stuff with like people pulling ideas from the real world and they're putting the comic interpretation on it, and just taking it somewhere else. It's kind of like if I had to compare it to something, a lot of it's kind of like those early Fantastic Four comics, right? Where there's so much happening at any given moment, like you just want to keep reading it, and when it's over, sometimes you don't even want to read the next story. You want to read this one again, right? So yeah, it definitely deserves that title of jumpstarting the Silver Age. Like it's no question about it to me, because then the question then becomes, okay, well, if this didn't do it, what did, right?
Mm.
So then it's like, well, okay, well, if the Silver Age doesn't begin here, then where did it begin, right? And what can you name,
Yeah. Well, you mentioned both mentioned Fantastic Four there. And
Mhm.
I guess that would be the other contender, wouldn't it? Fantastic
Yeah.
Four #1 is where the Silver Age of comics began. But I think, like Duy said, and you said, that this isn't a million miles away from Fantastic Four #1.
Mhm.
In terms of
Yeah.
imagination, I think the main difference with Stan and Jack's approach to superhero comics would be if this had been a Stan and Jack comic, Iris would be way angrier with Barry for being late all the time. And
Yeah.
Barry would be like, "Why am I cursed with this speed?" But apart from
Yeah.
that, the fact that they're both quite happy, well-adjusted people,
Mhm.
apart from that, the imagination and the ideas just thrown at you on every page are the same. And like, I think in retrospect, people kind of think of Infantino's art as being quite sort of, like not very kinetic, not very flowing, not very exciting, maybe. But I think it is, I think maybe like because he was drawing Flash in the 80s, and
Yeah.
I don't think he was putting the same sort of effort into it in the 80s. But these early
Yeah.
stories are incredible. They look fantastic. Like
Yeah.
they're
Yeah.
just a pleasure to read.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so I completely agree with both of you, and also like yeah, it's a product of its time. It reflects the era it was made in. I mean, as someone who is an American, just having this slice of 1950s, early 60s Americana, atomic age America, just distilled onto the page is really interesting and really exciting. And just this feeling that, like, yeah, they come through World War II and the whole future is ahead of them. Okay, the Cold War was going on, but at the same time, there
Yeah.
was this
Mhm.
excitement, I feel, or at least they wanted to convey this excitement, and that's apparent as well. And just like you guys said, the idea of science moving so fast, just getting us from where we were at the beginning of the 20th century to this horrible technologically advanced internet dystopia that we live in now. That sort of speedy process of science, Flash comes out right in the middle of that
Mhm.
acceleration in technology and innovation and science, and it all comes across on the page.
Mhm.
So yeah, I completely agree with both of you. But the question is, why is Barry the perfect hero for this? Is he the perfect hero for this? What do you think, Doy?
This is a hard question because I could say Barry is the perfect hero for this on account of it was the science age, it was the age of discovery, and they made Barry a scientist, right? But then I also have to think about it, it's like maybe Barry is the perfect hero for it simply because he came first. If, for example, Hal Jordan had come first, would Hal Jordan have been the perfect hero for this? I it's hard for me to separate the chronology of it with the actual character. I
Yeah.
will say that I do think that the ability to run fast and the ability to move fast is such a primal fantasy for children, and that therefore it's it lends itself to the sheer pure imagination that these stories have, because something is crazy in every single one of these issues. um Gorilla City is not really a thing where you would think, oh yeah, that is totally something that belongs in the Flash.
Mhm.
But somehow it is. Superman has alien planets. That makes sense, right? Batman has like the mean streets of Gotham. That makes sense. Wonder Woman has an island full of mythological creatures. That makes sense. Green Lantern has whole alien planets. That also makes sense. The Flash has Gorilla City. That makes no sense. But again, it acts as a precursor to what would happen in the Fantastic Four. where everything is just thrown in there.
Mm.
And I don't know if I might be doing it a disservice to continue comparing it to the Fantastic Four, but I really do think that it provides the foundation of what happens later when Stan and Jack get on the Fantastic Four, because the Fantastic Four is all about breaking the rules of superhero comics. The Flash is the rules, right? It has Carmine Infantino's like anatomically correct artwork. It's got this clean storytelling by where you have the beginning, middle, and an end in every single adventure. You can't break the rules. You can't go out of the box without establishing the box first. The Flash establishes the box, and it's a great box.
But again, I think because, like we were saying, because it's the rules, people think that these comics are perhaps stuffy and boring, and they're not at all. Like it's a great box. It's a fantastic box. Yeah. Lamar, what do you think? What is Barry the perfect guy for this? And if so, why?
Dewey said everything I was going to say. So what I'm going to add to that is that, while the Flash creates this box, each one of these stories spends its time taking everything out of the box again, right? So it's like and like what you were talking about like Carmine Infantino's art, he when he drew Barry from the side, he always drew him with his large head, and so he was, when people would ask him why he did that, he was like, I just wanted to convey he was smart, so he had his big head. It's like if a big head, you have a big brain, right? So to speak, just in comic language. We know that there's no correlation scientifically to that. But, just in comic language, it just conveys that he's an intelligent person. He's not just powerful, right? And when you talk about like someone who runs fast, right? And that's kind of like the thing now. People, the cynics are always like, well, the Flash can't be that powerful. All he does is run fast, right? But the way that his powers are explained is that he's one of these people that has complete control over his body on the molecular level. Doesn't matter who you are. If you have that as like the base of your power set, you're extremely powerful, right? You can think about all of these other characters like Plastic Man or like the Atom, for example, but it's funny, like what you were saying about Gorilla City. Like if you go back to like, I think it's issue 105, it's the first appearance of the Pied Piper. Now think about it in retrospect, right? Just speak to how crazy this stuff is. When you look at like the opening of that is the Flash running from this gorilla that's shooting a beam out of its head, right? And so, and me as a kid reading this, I'm thinking, oh, that's Gorilla Grodd, right? But then the more you read it, and then you're like, no, it's not Gorilla Grodd. It's a guy in a suit.
I mean, come on.
You know what I'm saying? I mean, like it is, but it ain't, right? So it's like you read it, and then there's this dude in a suit, and he's got a machine in the head of the gorilla mask. And so it's like, you know what? I wasn't expecting that, but I'm glad I got it, right? So it's like you have these moments where like, the rules are being established and stuff, and then they'll do something, and then it's just like everything breaks, but it breaks in the best way possible, right? And so the mythos that was created for Barry, it's created in those early issues like that because of that. And it's like they were doing it over and over and over and over and over again. And it was so slick that you don't necessarily catch it when you're reading it because you're in it. You know what I mean? And as a person who reads comics and has been reading comics my whole life, that's exactly where I want to be when I'm reading a story, and just going back and just reading these for this, man, was great. Like, like I, even though I've read these stories a million times, like we were talking about the omnibus, I gotta get it because I gotta have that. That's going to be like one of my book bag joints where I take it with me everywhere. You know what I mean? Yeah.
Yeah. I completely agree with you both again. Barry, absolutely the right person for this. I want to touch on what you said, Day, about like, could it have been Hal? And I think it could have been because, there's that whole kind of test pilot astronaut thing going on. But I think the thing about Barry is that, he's got that curiosity that comes with science. So it's not like he was saying, it's not just super speed. It's like, well, also he can vibrate his molecules through walls, and he can invent a costume that fits in his ring, just like lifeboats or something.
Scientists are more interesting than policemen.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, he's a policeman as well in the sense that he's
You know what I
enforcing
mean.
the law. Yeah, but absolutely. But he's a particularly, he's a cool flavor of policeman, isn't he? He's a police scientist. So he's got that scientist curiosity that doesn't just like something with someone like Quicksilver, for example, just to pick another speedster, just runs fast. That's all he does. Whereas Barry's like, okay, I can run fast. What now? And that's very much the science, isn't it? It's like we know this. Okay, now that we know this, what does that mean? What's the next thing? And that's what the Flash is, and that's what these comics are. And the other thing about Flash is that he's not just a scientist; he's a science communicator. And
Yeah.
perhaps I'm just saying this because I work in science communication, but um, he is a science communicator. I mean, he's one of the most famous things about Barry Allen is his flash fact. And actually, in these run of comics, they're not actually called flash
Yeah,
facts
he
yet.
doesn't actually say the words flash facts in this
No,
run.
no,
That
Mhm.
but
surprised me. I thought it was there from
yeah,
the beginning, but it wasn't.
no, but they're there. I mean, and every single rogue as well,
Mhm.
all the villains, all the rogues are based in some scientific principle that has then been taken what's next, on this like amazing journey into fantasy. Then, like, so and Barry often uses these scientific principles to defeat the rogues, even down to like when Barry and Wally time travel to fight some golden giants, which is quite a fantastic situation. When that story begins with another scientist talking about how once upon a time all the continents were one big landmass that over time drifted apart from each other. So even going back in time to fight golden giants starts with a scientific principle, with like a little
Mhm.
fact that you're teaching the reader. So that's what I love about these comics, and that's what they bring to the table, I think. And that's what Barry brings to the table as well. That curiosity and wonder that comes with science.
I find it interesting because we were talking about Carmine Infantino's art, but that for the most part, Carmine is doing this really, really clean cartooning, right?
Mm.
But then sometimes you have a close up of Barry's face, and it's like the super rendered cross-hatched thing. I was like,
Yeah,
where did that come from?
like he's suddenly all in shadow, like
Like
Yeah.
all of a
yeah,
sudden it's like super detailed. I'm
yeah,
like,
yeah,
what? It's
Yeah.
it's off brand. I'm not complaining. I like it, but it's off
yeah,
brand and it's out of place with the rest of the comic. But it's like Carmine Infantino just decided, you know what? I'm bored.
yeah.
I'm gonna show you how I can draw other things. It's
Yeah, yeah.
pretty cool. It is pretty cool.
So, what would be your favorite stories amongst this run then? Do
We're gonna disqualify the big one, right?
Okay, so yeah, let's just say right now, Flash number 123, Flash of Two Worlds, the last comic in this collection. We'll talk about that at the end.
I
But
mean,
apart from that, what's your favorite in this run?
okay, so I'm sure that apart from that, which many times on this same channel, on this show, Lamar has called that one of the greatest stories ever told in the English language.
And it is. Yeah.
And it is. So apart from that, I'm gonna go with my favorite Flash Rogue is the Mirror Master. And the reason he's my favorite Flash Rogue is this is true for most Flash rogues, and I also kind of want to talk a little bit about the rogues and how I think maybe half of them from this run haven't really stood the test of time, but the other half really, really have. The Mirror Master, I love the Mirror Master simply because it's such a simple concept. He controls mirrors, right? I mean, everybody else, like Captain Cold and everything, like, sure, yes, it's a simple concept, but something about controlling mirrors like really triggers the imagination side of me. And when Barry beats him by using scientific facts about the way mirrors work and the way light works, my God, if I had read this at 5 years old, like I would have eaten it up so much. And then I would have been that annoying kid telling everyone, do you know that if you just turn off the lights, mirrors stop working?
Yeah.
Right? That is the Mirror Master is my favorite Flash Rogue. I love the stories with Mirror Master in it. Also, a shout out to the first appearance of the world's greatest detective, second greatest detective, Ralph Dibny, the Elongated Man.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was great.
Fantastic. Yeah, it's I think out of the I think there's is there two or three Mirror Master stories in this run. But I think the second one is one of my
Yeah.
favorites,
What
where
happens in the second one?
Mirror Master traps Flash in a big bottle and is
Yeah,
mind controlling him like a genie for reasons. And, I love that story, and he gets Flash to go and get him some figs from from the other side of the world, and then some snow from Mount Everest or whatever. Yeah,
he's
I love
great.
that
I
story.
love the Mirror Master.
Yeah, he's fantastic. Yeah, and I like how he's yeah, like and this has been built upon by writers since then, particularly Mark Waid and Jeff Johns, I think. But I just love the idea that the rogues aren't like super scientists; they're just ordinary guys
Just ran into
who
things.
ran into things. You know, in
Mhm.
America, the land of opportunity, where scientific marvels just await you for you to stumble across. You know, it's the
I'll,
American dream. The rogues, you know.
Mhm.
I'll also point out, obviously, I just love the Mirror Master as a villain, as like the thing he does, because the current Mirror Master is not this Mirror Master.
Yeah, yeah,
It doesn't matter. It's the Mirror Master.
yeah.
Like,
Absolutely, yeah.
yeah, it doesn't matter.
Well, I mean, they're both kind of working class people who stumbled across the technology, aren't they? Like, and used it to steal stuff. I mean, just one of them Scottish. That's it, isn't
That's
it?
pretty much it.
Yeah.
Created by a Scottish writer named Grant Morrison.
Grant Morrison, who turns up in this run several times. Have you noticed?
Mhm. Yep.
So there's stories in this run. When you buy this collection, watch out for it. Grodd at one point turns into a human, and he basically turns into Grant Morrison. Like the way he's drawn looks like Grant Morrison. And even I think they're even wearing a purple suit. And then later on, Grodd takes over another human's body, who also, by coincidence, happens to look like Grant Morrison. And then later on, then completely separate from Grodd, there's a villain from another dimension who can see an hour into the future. And no, it's not him. He's a different one. There's so many bald villains in this,
Mhm.
but there's another bald villain who looks like Grant Morrison later on, basically. So, yeah, Grant Morrison. They have somehow managed to insert themselves into DC stories written before they were born, which is a very Grant Morrison thing to do, I think. Um, so Lamar, same question then. What are your favorite stories in this run?
Oh man, I'm gonna name three off the rip that just come to mind real quick. Number 110, which is the first appearance of the Weather Wizard. Number 111, which speaking to what we were just talking about how some of them didn't stick around. You have the cloud creatures, which are basically these clouds that somehow have faces, and they chase Barry around shooting lightning bolts at him, which is kind of a recurring theme in this comic, especially like with the weather wizard, and because there's at one point, he's like the weather wizard just pops up, and he points the stick at him, and he shoots the lightning beam, and he's like, oh, he's trying to shoot me with lightning with that stick he's got. So
Yeah.
just that kind of stuff. Like, I know a lot of people think that's cheesy, but like, cheesy is not a pejorative to me, so I love that stuff. And last but not least, the first appearance of my main man, Captain Cold, in 114. Like, that cover is like when you get to because the cover is like the fastest man on the planet meets the coldest man on the planet. Yeah, he's the coldest man on the planet in a whole lot of ways. But like that first page, like when you have the splash page and stuff, and it's like Barry's running towards Captain Cold, and there's just this huge like block of ice with like trucks and stuff in it. And so the first time I read that, I was like, what is this? Right? Because I'm like, how is he doing it? Is it the gun that's doing it, or does he have powers? Like, what's happening? So I was just immediately fascinated with this dude. And a lot of it, like, his look is great. Like, I don't know why they ever thought that they could improve on that look, but his look is just like, it's wild. Like, even down to the glasses he wears, like the glasses the Inuit people make out of bone, to keep the sunlight from bouncing up into their face off the snow. Like, all of that stuff, man, is just great. But yeah, Flash's villains, they definitely don't get like as a rogues gallery. I feel like that's kind of starting to change now, but just like over time, everybody would talk about Spider-Man and Batman, rightfully so, right?
Rightfully
But
so.
I would always bring up the Flash's villains, and people would be like, the Weather Wizard, like, what is that about? Are you serious? And I'm like, no, 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 no. Y'all don't understand, right? So, these first couple of issues, like, it shows you like how you have like what you were just saying, Paulie. You have Flash, who's this super powerful, super smart scientist, and you just have these guys who are finding these scientific marvels in trash cans, and they decide they want to become criminals, right? It's the perfect setup, So it's just great. Like, even like I'm flipping through 114 now, and like, Captain Cold, he's cool, but he's kind of creepy looking and stuff like that. You know what I mean? And it's a lot happening at once, and it's great. It's just absolutely great.
And Captain Cold decides he's in love with Iris, doesn't he, in his second appearance?
Yes, he does.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And that's never mentioned again.
No, when Captain Cold builds that, cold force field out surrounding Central City, that is an amazing visual for a 1950s comic.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Like, I didn't really expect to see it. Now, the thing about Flash's rogues, I mean, yes, we talk about Spider-Man's rogues and Batman's rogues. Here's the thing, Batman and Spider-Man also have some pretty bad rogues. Like, nobody cares about Will-O-the-Wisp. Yeah. Okay. But the thing about the Flash is like those, I want to say 5, Captain Cold, Mirror Master, Weather Wizard, Heat Wave, and the Trickster.
The Trickster, yeah.
Like, and you can throw the top in there, and obviously not in this collection, Professor Zoom.
Yeah.
The Reverse Flash. Those are really, really solid concepts with really, really solid designs.
Yeah.
Like, they look exactly, well, maybe except for the Mirror Master. Oh, Captain Boomerang. I forgot Captain Boomerang.
Yeah.
They look exactly like you think they would look if I told you their name. And they have the exact powers. It's like such a simple concept, and it totally works because they are the best there is at that one thing that they do.
Yeah.
And you're saying how great they looked. I mean, it's interesting to me how like Barry is the only one with a form-fitting costume almost, and Kid Flash as well. And all the rogues have these beautiful kind of elaborate costumes with like all these, even Elongated Man, who is an ally, has these beautiful wrinkled gloves that go up his arm and kind of concertina out when he stretches.
Hmm.
And all the rogues, they've got these beautifully like these capes and these flowing kind of shirts. And so it really makes the Flash, who has got one of the best costumes in comics anyway, his
Hmm.
costume really stands out then because it's the only sort of sleek, form-fitting one there. And I think that's a really good choice on. Going back to like favorite stories in this, I mentioned that second Mirror Master one. That's one of my favorites. I think it's the second Grodd story, where because like this collection features at least two underground race of people and at least two underwater race of people.
It's
And
just like the Fantastic Four.
it is, yeah, absolutely, yeah, yeah. And this story, and it's just such a perfect example of what you were saying, Dave, about how like so much is going on in any one story. Grodd escapes from Gorilla City, and Flash tracks him to underground. And so Flash gets to him by vibrating through the ground until he reaches this underground civilization, and it's bird people living underground, which is great. And Grodd's just like taken over all the bird people with his force of mind powers. And but Flash can't stop him because there's a special atmosphere called, what's it called, Mola or something like that. There's a
Molo.
Molo,
Mola,
yeah.
something like that. And when Flash runs in this atmosphere, it solidifies around him in a big crystal. So, you've got the threat of Grodd, you've got the threat of the bird people, you've got like this Mola, there's so much going on in it. Like, and of course, Flash triumphs over it all by being clever and nice, which is what he always does. So that is
I-
definitely one of my favorites. That,
I'm surprised that's the Grodd story you named because in
yeah,
our group chat right before this,
yes. Okay, so there's another Grodd story. I think it's the first Grodd
this
story.
is the first appearance of Gorilla
Yeah.
Grodd.
So Grodd, he escapes from Gorilla City for the first time, and Solivar, the king of Gorilla City, is just chilling in a circus. I think he's got captured and he doesn't want to give the game away, so he's just pretending to be an ordinary gorilla. So Grodd just rocks up and taunts him like outside the cage. That's quite funny. But also, Barry's friend is an actor who is in a play called The Giant Gorilla or something like that. And this play has been running for 3 years. You can see it on a poster, really successful play. And this guy, Fred Pearson, is the name of the actor. He's got top billing. His name is on top of the poster. So, and he plays the gorilla. And every night he goes out on stage in a gorilla costume and plays the lead role in this play. And you can see the set, and it's a house because you can see like a set of stairs and a banister in the background, and like there's like an inside door of a house on the set of the stage, and I'm just like, I have to see this play. What is this play? The giant gorilla. This gorilla's in a house. Does he live there? Is he visiting? Is he renting? What's going on? Why is this gorilla in the house? How can a gorilla sustain the lead role of a play? Like, what is happening here? But on top of that, for no apparent reason, every single night, Grodd knocks out the actor, takes his place on stage, and just plays this part in this theatre for no reason, right? Because it's not to hide himself, because he's only hide himself for like 2 or 3 hours tops a night, by doing this. So he just Grodd wants to be in a play, I guess.
We need to point out that at this point in the Silver Age, it had been, I believe, discovered and proved as fact that if you put a gorilla on the cover of a comic, the sales go up. Why?
But this comic doesn't even have Grodd on the cover. I think Pied Piper's on the cover.
Pied Piper is on the
Mhm.
cover.
Yeah.
So I can
Mhm.
only conclude that John Broome and Carmine Infantino was just like, oh, I've got this story about a gorilla I really want to tell.
And
He's
I
in a
also
play.
want to point out that everything you noticed about the play is all told in the pictures. At no point is that ever mentioned in the story at all. You kind of
Yeah,
just have
yeah,
to look at the pictures to
Yeah.
see all of
Yeah.
these like
Mhm.
little details that you notice. So that is actually a really great lesson for anyone reading comics. You have to look at the pictures, everyone.
yeah. Otherwise, because like half of it's a great story, but half of what's great about it is this play, the existence of this play in Flash's universe.
It's
So
so
yeah,
great.
basically all the Grodd stories are winners. Like there's that one where Grodd makes the Flash really fat for no reason, and Flash, yeah, and Flash has to sit in a room with a load of potatoes to become thin again.
That's so great.
That's literally what he does.
There's a few things. There's a few things in this collection that I think so it's all like based in science, right? But then like I do think that even if it is based in science, John Broome and Carmine Infantino are just like, you know what, we're just gonna have fun anyway. So that's one of
Yeah.
them.
Mhm.
The other one is that story with the Three Stooges who aren't the Three Stooges.
Yes. The
Mhm.
three dimwits. They are Jay Garrick supporting characters, aren't they?
Are they?
Mhm.
I'm pretty
Yeah.
sure they are. Yeah, yeah.
Oh
Because I think,
wow.
yeah, because I think they're basically like Marx Brothers Three Stooges ripoffs, like
Yeah.
Okay.
cashing in on
Mhm.
that era of stuff. And
Mhm.
yeah, they turn up in like Jay stories, and they must have just decided to bring them back for Barry. So they
Yeah.
came back before Jay, which is weird.
Wait, hold on. So they were Jay's supporting characters, but they're on the same Earth as Barry?
Obviously, they are Earth One versions of what are they called?
Obviously.
Noddy, Toddy, and Roddy, or whatever the hell they're called. Like, I don't
Yep.
know, Winky, Blinky. I don't know. I can't remember what they're called.
The other thing is the trickster with his little jet boot things.
Oh, yes.
Flying as high as an airplane,
Yeah.
which that would kill you, James Jesse. That would kill you.
Like, James, the trickster shouldn't work. Like, the trickster's about three different characters just plonked into one character because he's got the Harlequin thing going on, the gimmick tricks going on. He's got the flying boots going on, and he's also got the fact that he's got the same name as a notorious outlaw, Jesse James, and
Backwards.
yeah, but backwards. And all of three of these things on their own would make for a villain, but they've just plonked them all into this one character, and it works. It shouldn't work, but it does work. He's brilliant. Yeah.
Watch out from a new character named the Kid Billy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah, so I think I've covered our favorite stories now, haven't I? Yeah.
Mhm.
So I
Yeah.
think it's time to get even more specific now. We've already talked about the rogues a lot here. Is there anything else you want to say about any of your favorite rogues? We've talked about Captain Cold, Weather Wizard, Mirror
Mirror
Master,
Master.
Trickster. Anyone else you want to talk about?
My single favorite villain shows up in number 123. You know who that is, and you
The
know why
Shade.
he's my favorite villain. But let's
The
talk about
Shade.
that later.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. All three of the villains in that are great, actually. Um, yeah. What about Pied Piper? Do you think he? Because like obviously later on, he was given a lot more layers as a character in the
Yeah,
80s.
yeah.
He was one of the first openly gay DC Comics characters, if not the first, but one of the first, surely. And of course, he turned over a new leaf. He was one of the first rogues to go straight.
You go reforming himself.
Is
Yeah,
he as interesting
Mhm.
back in the day, though? Is he one of the more interesting rogues, would you say?
I never mentioned this at all, but I have an obsession with the Pied Piper of Hamelin. Like
Yes,
with
I
with
remember
the
you saying this.
with the
Yeah.
story, the Pied Piper of Hamelin. So I would have really thought that I would have eaten up the character of the Pied Piper way more than I did or do. Um, but there is something about him because it is as simple a concept as all of the others that we've mentioned, but there is something about him that for some reason I think doesn't put him on that level. I don't know
Yeah,
what it is, and I think he is better served as being part of Wally's supporting cast than he
yeah,
was as a rogue.
I agree. Yeah. Well, like when you were naming the rogues earlier on, you didn't mention him, and I didn't notice that you didn't mention him. So I think
Yeah.
that says a lot. You mentioned all the rest.
I forgot Gorilla Grodd, but I also think of him separately from the rest of them.
He's kind of a bit
Yeah.
like Zoom. He's his own thing, isn't he?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
almost.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
He's not the same guy. He's not.
So,
It's a separate thing. In a way, he feels more dangerous than the rest of them. It's because he's a
yes, he
gorilla
does.
with telepathic powers.
Yeah.
Yeah. And he likes eating people.
Yes. And I think any villain who's just striding around butt naked all the time is inherently, scary. Like this guy just doesn't care.
Lamar, do you agree about the Pied Piper? Is he missing something as a rogue?
I think that probably especially during the time that he debuts, um, I think that he probably suffers from like being a little too on the nose, right? And what I mean by that is, like you were saying, about your obsession with the Pied Piper story, which actually explains a whole lot in retrospect, but but it's but it's just that exists already, right? So, and even during that time in the school system, children were still reading that story, right? Like when I was in school in the 80s, I heard about that story like through other means outside of school, right? Or somebody might make reference to it or something and tell you about it, but we didn't read it. So, there's no such thing as Mirror Master. There's no such thing as, the Weather Wizard. Like none of that stuff exists anywhere but here, right? And I think that might have been the issue, because it's like if you're going to take that concept and you're going to try to make it work, like how do you do it within all of this craziness that's happening, right? And so you can, and with those stories, like a lot of that European folk literature and stuff like that, there's only so far you could carry it because you got to remember children are buying these things, right? So you can't take it all the way there, right? So, it's kind of like, what do you do? And I think they did the best job they could have done with it, and I think that it's probably that to me, because, I liked that first appearance of the Pied Piper. Like, I liked him. I mean, obviously, even though he was on the cover, he wasn't the most interesting thing in the book to me, right? So, like we talking about the guy in the gorilla outfit, and then we talking about the real gorilla that do the stuff, right? There's no way a guy playing a woodwind instrument is going to compete with that. It doesn't really matter what he does, right? So, I think maybe it's probably that, but I do think that he benefited from the later iteration of him where he he straightens himself out and you know what I mean. That part of him I think was a lot more interesting because you have a lot more to work with. That's not really based around anything that he does in particular, right? It's just it's pure character development. And by that time, I think he was the one that needed it the most, and that was a good call. So I think that if all things considered, um, you know, I don't like I've never been one that was like hated the Pied Piper or thought he was corny or anything like that. I just was like I wanted to see what else they could do with him, and then
Right.
and they did it,
He was just kind of there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
He was like the
Yeah.
weakest rogue, so they did something else with
Yeah.
him, which is
Hmm.
great. Yeah.
Well, I think what surprises me about the Pied Piper is that because of Wade's run, because they were the two reformed ones, I'd always associated the Pied Piper with the Trickster, thinking
Mm.
that they were kind of on the same level, and they're not. No,
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
Trickster is significantly more interesting as a villain.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Definitely. Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah. Well, it was only Underworld Unleashed, wasn't it, where Wade made Trickster turn over a new leaf.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
then, of
Hmm.
course, Jeff Johns revealed it was all Zatanna's doing.
That's true.
Hmm.
That's
Yeah.
true.
Yeah, yeah.
And then
There's a
he turned him evil again, right? If I remember it.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. He's
Yeah.
he's evil again now. He's There was a recent story where he made Barry believe that his legs had been chopped off.
It is. He's just a much more. He's much more interesting as a villain, and the
Yeah,
Pied
yeah.
Piper is much more interesting as a supporting cast member.
Absolutely, definitely. I really like Captain Boomerang. He's one of my absolute favorites. The literally the only thing I don't like about James Gunn's The Suicide Squad is that Captain Boomerang gets killed. Because I love Captain Boomerang. I've even got purely by accident, I've even kind of got Captain Boomerang here at the moment.
Captain Boomerang is great.
He's fantastic.
No. Yeah. 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 I mean, yeah. I think he's another one that kind of like, even though he doesn't have powers, you know, like Zoom or Grodd, he kind of like his own thing,
Yeah.
Yeah,
almost like he's
yeah.
kind of like in the middle, right?
Hmm.
Yeah, but as far as like his visual presentation and stuff, it's like it's out of this world because it's simple, but his cost like how do you incorporate boomerangs into a guy's costume,
Yeah.
right? And not have it look ridiculous. Like
You
they
know,
found a way to do it.
Marvel has that guy named Boomerang.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know. So it's like, yeah, like, and I mean just his whole thing with the trick boomerangs and stuff like that, I think that's fly. I've always liked that. Like I thought that he lost something when they just was just like he don't have that no more. He just got the sharp boomerangs now. Like,
Yeah.
I thought he lost something. Like it was something that made him unique and they took it from him. And, to me, like he became less interesting, even visually, you know?
I will say
Um,
that as as proof of their staying power, one, when Justice League Unlimited did a Flash-centric episode, the four villains they used are Captain Cold, the Mirror Master, Captain Boomerang, and the Trickster.
mhm.
And as much as I love Wally West's run as the Flash, specifically Mark Wade's run, Jeremy Adams' run, but also like, William Mesner Loeb's run, etc. They did try to give Wally his own villains, but they just keep going back
Yeah.
Mm.
to these guys because these guys are so good.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Well, Wade literally blew him up, didn't he, in Underworld Unleashed? And like it was like barely a few months until they were back, wasn't it?
Yeah,
Like,
brought them back.
Mhm.
yeah. Back from hell, literally.
Exactly.
Yeah, but I know what you mean about the sharp boomerangs there. It's not a great Captain Boomerang story unless he has strapped the Flash to a giant boomerang and tried to
Right.
shoot him in space. You know?
Right. And he's another one that has the rockets on the shoes. Because
Yes,
like,
yeah,
that was like one of his things. He would zoom around and and stuff like that. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah, he's great. So we covered the rogues there. Let's talk about Flash's allies for a bit. Let's talk about Wally, who turns up for the first time and weirdly doesn't actually team up with the Flash for like
Not for a while,
ages.
no.
Yeah, until the
Mhm.
Golden Giant story,
Yeah.
It's
which is
weird,
nuts.
right? It's weird.
Yeah, he
Like,
kind of like while he gets his powers, Flash gives him the costume and is like, "Off you go then."
yeah, it was definitely like this is a separate feature
Yeah,
because
yeah,
we
yeah,
don't want to write two Barry stories in 1 month.
yeah, yeah,
That's
yeah.
what it comes off to me like. I'm gonna go ahead and say Wally has the dumbest origin of any superhero.
Yes.
Yeah, that's pretty safe to say. Yeah.
What if the exact same fluke thing that happened to the Flash happens to this child?
The other thing that struck me about Wally is what a little grass he is in these early stories. Like, he's just snitching on gang members all the time, isn't he? But
Mhm.
obviously, I love Wally as well. He's
Yeah.
brilliant, and I do love these early stories as well. Um,
I dislike that Kid Flash's original costume is just the Flash's costume.
yeah,
I
it's
don't
so
like
weird.
that.
It's so
Everything
weird. Not
everything about him at first, his origin and his costume are like, let's just create another Flash, except he's a child.
yeah. I I'd le I'd be really interested to hear the perspective of people who only know Wally reading this collection when it comes out,
Mhm.
because everything except for one thing that's good about Wally comes later after this collection, I think.
Mhm. Yeah.
And like, so the yellow costume doesn't appear in this collection, and his connection with the Titans doesn't come till later. And then obviously, like, his personality gets really rounded out in the 80s and the 90s.
Mhm.
But the one thing the Wally in this collection has that is still there today is just how much he loves being Kid Flash and how much he
Yeah.
loves being the Flash.
Yeah.
And that is there right from the start. And I think it was Mark Waid who specifically brought that back in a big way.
Yeah.
And it's become like one of the defining things of Wally, that he cannot believe his luck. He loves being the Flash. And
He loves his
whenever,
job, yeah. He loves his
yeah, he
powers.
loves his job, loves his powers, loves being the Flash. And whenever they go away from that, they lose Wally. Like 80s Wally in the Titans, in the Wolfman Perez Titans. I can't stand him. I hate him. He's just always moaning about being Kid Flash. He hates being Kid Flash. He wants to retire all the time. And then,
Yes.
of course, under Dan Didio after Rebirth, when they brought Wally back and they didn't really know what to do with him, again, he's like, you had that Heroes in Crisis business where, like, again, he's tormented. Being the Flash has become a burden to him,
Mhm.
and you lose Wally in all that,
You do.
Um, and
I
I'm saying it as someone who probably likes Heroes in Crisis more than most people do, but
I do
but
love, like everybody knows, like, I love George Perez. I love everything he's ever done. That Titans run is a little dated, but I do enjoy it. It is the worst version of Wally that I've ever read. I didn't read Heroes in Crisis, but it is the worst version of Wally that I've ever read. And every time I read that Titans run, I was like, why is Wally like this?
yeah,
Mhm.
Right?
Yeah.
It's terrible. But
yeah,
later, when they reboot Wally after Crisis, and they make it so that he's obsessed with eating, yeah, that's a little annoying too. But then, like, slowly but surely, they build back up to him being the happy, the Wally that is happy to be the Flash.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Once you get there, then it's just that is peak Wally.
yeah,
And
Mhm.
yeah,
when
Yeah.
when Jeremy Adams gets on Wally, and he enjoys being Wally, and he enjoys having his little Flash family around. That's the best part about Wally.
yeah. And that's here in this collection. That's here in these early stories.
It is
Wally
fundamental to
loves
his
being
to
Kid
his
Flash.
character that
Yeah,
he
yeah,
likes what he's doing.
yeah. And he can't believe his luck,
Yes.
which again is really important when he is a lucky son of a bitch, getting struck by lightning in the exact same place as Barry, and.
I'm going to point out that Justice League Unlimited episode again, when
Mm.
at the very end, when Wally's like smiling and stuff, and Orion says something like, "Oh, I get it now. You joke to hide a warrior's pain," right? Which I feel is like some sort of commentary on fans who think that there should be like
Mm.
some underlying dark motive for somebody to just do good. And Wally just looks at him. He's like, dude, we saved the day.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like it is as simple as this for the
Yeah.
Flash.
Yeah.
We should never root them in angst, is what I'm saying.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah. So my next question to you, let's look at Barry a bit more then, now that we've looked at Wally, because an accusation that gets thrown around a lot is that Barry these days that Barry has basically just got Wally's personality because originally he had no personality. So these days they just give him Wally's personality. And I think it is true to say that Barry loves being the Flash too, right?
Yes.
So what distinguishes Barry from Wally, particularly in these early stories? Like what is core Barry apart from we've already talked about the scientific curiosity and the imagination. What else is there?
I'm gonna go ahead and say this is gonna sound cheeky, but it's obvious. Wally's a child.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
So Wally approaches it with childlike wonder. And that carries over to when he's an adult.
yeah,
Barry is not a child. And while he does approach it with wonder, he also has on his mind adult things a lot. Like, oh no, Iris is dating someone. Oh
yeah,
no, I'm going to be late for my date with Iris. Oh no, now that Iris is dating someone, but I just want the Mirror Master, I'm going to use the Mirror Master's technology to make Iris see me everywhere so she can't forget me.
yeah. That's weird. That is that hasn't aged well.
Stuff like that. So, like,
Mm,
it is pretty much that. I think he's just more toned down because he's not a
mm,
child and he does have like adult concerns.
yeah. What do you think, Lamar? What makes Barry Barry and different from Wally?
I think going back to like what you guys were saying about like the imagination thing, it's like they process it different. Like because Barry has all the scientific know-how, like the things that he does is filtered through that. Whereas with Wally, and I feel like this continues when he becomes an adult, his is filtered through his perspective, like Dewey said, as a child, right? And when he gets older, like he has these struggles. He's like, man, I'm on a JLA. I don't really belong here. I'm just a placeholder for my uncle. Like, I can't compete with these guys, and stuff like that. And then, like, even when he kind of grows into his own and he kind of sheds all of that, like when he uses the speed force, it's like intuitive to him. It's like picking up a fork or something, right? You know, so he's not really thinking about it as much. Still, it's just in a different way. Whereas, Barry is still looking at it like a scientist would. So when you look at something scientifically, you've broken it down in your head in a whole bunch of different ways to put it back together again. And then you can say, oh, well, I'm going to do it like this, but it's because I've thought about it in a million different ways already. Right. So I kind of know what's going to work and what's not. Whereas, Wally tends to kind of do it because he just kind of feels his way through it, like,
Mm,
and I think that, you know, their identities as far as that's concerned are still rooted in their first appearances, but they both have kind of grown from it. You know what I mean?
mm,
Obviously, they're more seasoned now. So it's really interesting, when they're together. Like I always like those Barry and Wally stories when they're together. They're always great to me. But I think to me that's the part that sticks out. Um, but like you guys were saying, like in this run, he has those backup stories and he's always beating up gang members and stuff. Um, so it's kind of like the bum of the month club or whatever, you know what I mean? So like where Barry is dealing with these people that have all these gadgets and powers and stuff, he's in 114, like Barry's beating up Captain Cold, and then Wally goes and he finds these beatniks hanging out in this house or whatever, and they're a gang, and he beats the crap out of the beatniks. I mean, I don't mind that, but I mean, I'm just saying, right? Like I'm willing to give him a pass on just beating up gangs because he tore the frame out these beatnik people. But
Yeah,
it's just kind of, so it's like in that kind of way you can do things with Wally as a child you can't really do with Barry because it doesn't make sense, right?
yeah, yeah,
And I think in different ways that plays itself out even when Wally becomes an adult, even when they use the rogues, it's different, right? It's not quite the
yeah,
same, and that's one of the things that, and Wally's just an interesting character just on his own, you know. He's a great character. Um, and so, things I would expect by now for things to go differently with one than they go with the other, because they're
yeah,
definitely not placeholders with one another, or at least they
yes,
shouldn't be. Yeah.
yeah. I completely agree, and I think that curiosity goes a long way with Barry, because like with Wally, he loves being the Flash so much. I think there's an element of I'm not going to look a gift horse in the mouth, to him and his powers, right? Whereas Barry's
Hmm.
always, like I said earlier on, what's next? What's coming next? What can I, why is this happening? Whereas Wally isn't as interested in why things are happening traditionally,
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
mean,
which is
yes, you could
yeah,
say he was a little impulsive.
yes.
Oh, wow.
But this made Wally the perfect character to through his eyes to discover the Speed Force and all the secrets of super speed,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
Because Barry would be the guy who would really want to know it, right? Whereas
Hmm.
Wally's just kind of like, well, I'm just living my life, and this Max Mercury guy's coming along trying to tell me all this stuff, and that's a lot more interesting as a story, isn't it, to discover
Yeah.
it in that way? But then, of course, with Barry, yeah, this sort of scientific curiosity, he invented a cosmic treadmill, which is amazing, which doesn't appear sadly
It
in.
doesn't show up yet.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
No.
Hmm.
But I
Um,
will say, like, we were talking about Barry being the perfect character to launch the Silver Age. And I was talking about his adult concerns. And we've been talking about how his adventures are like a precursor to Lee Kirby Fantastic Four. But it also kind of feels like a precursor to Lee Ditko Spider-Man. Like
yes, yeah,
Yeah, I get that. Yeah.
the personal stuff, because
Yeah.
yes, Spider-Man's life is a mess. It is quote unquote the flawed superhero. Having my powers makes my life worse. But Barry is kind of the start of that. It is a much more simplistic version, which is
Hmm.
like being the Flash makes me late.
mm,
Okay. It's not as interesting and it's not as layered, but it is that stepping stone
Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
towards getting to a character like Peter Parker, who, by the
absolutely.
way, in our DC versus Marvel video, we put up against Barry Allen.
Yeah, well,
Yeah,
well,
you
I
sure
think
did. Yep.
another thing that Barry's got that's almost Peter Parker esque or like prototype Peter Parker. There's a loneliness to Barry that you don't have with Wally. And it's there in the stories, in these 1950s, 1960s stories that are in this collection. He's a guy who's kind of wrapped up in his own world, and that's part of him being late for his dates with Iris, right? Because he's so occupied with stuff. And you see it in like his relationships with other people in these stories. Iris is his only regular supporting character at this point. But he's got lots of friends. Fred Pearson, the actor, this old college roommate is a scientist that comes along. He's my best mate. This other guy comes along. He's an old friend, but he's not actually close to any of them. He's a nice guy, so people like him, but he's closed off from people. And I think it's there a little bit in these stories. And I think you see it in modern Barry in a way that you don't with Wally, and you definitely see it in the movie in the Snyder Justice League movie. This is a very lonely character when you first meet him, and that. So, and of course, like they've made it a sort of extreme version of that loneliness in that the thing he's occupied with is his mother's death now.
Mhm.
you know, whereas before he was just occupied with
Yeah.
science and shit.
I
But
mean,
it's fundamentally
also
the same character, though, you know.
also in this run of Barry stories we're reading, he hasn't met his best friend yet.
He hasn't met Hal yet, exactly.
He
Well,
hasn't
do you
met
know
Hal
what?
yet.
Another this aspect of his personality is also really apparent in JLA Year One. Wade kind of
Oh, that's
obviously
true.
recognized this and brought it into JLA Year One. So I think this loneliness is a really fundamental part of Barry, and I don't think you know the mystery of his parents, you know, his mother's murder. I don't think it's as alien to the concept of Barry as some fans would have you believe, because I think it feeds into this loneliness in a more modern way, perhaps. That said, I don't think Barry should be the guy who's always trying to fix things by time travel. That's an aspect of modern Barry I don't like. But
I'm not gonna get started down that wormhole.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Um, let's talk about Ralph. We've touched on him a little bit.
The world famous elongated man. Before we talk about Ralph Dibny as a character, I just want to say the cover to Flash number 112, where Flash is trying to chase Ralph and Ralph wraps himself around a tree.
Mhm.
My God, there is just something about stretching superheroes that
Yeah,
lends itself to a great visual. And this
yeah,
was one of them. Exquisite composition.
yeah, yeah, yeah. It's absolutely wonderful. Yeah, and visually, Elongated Man's great right from the start, I think.
Mhm.
Like I was saying earlier on about those wrinkled gloves, and he's got that huge mask, and it looks like a guy in a big mask. You know, it's wonderful.
It's not, the
Um,
mask isn't like painted on or something.
no,
And
no, yeah.
of course, like a little bit on the nose, we're talking about this being a precursor to Fantastic Four. So that's a little on the nose. But yes, another thing that I realized about Ralph as a precursor to Fantastic Four. Have you noticed that he barely stretches his neck?
Yeah,
Right.
yeah,
Uh-huh.
yeah,
Right?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, he does, but like he doesn't do it as much as he would do it way later on,
yeah,
especially
yeah.
in the JLI era. And that is a Mr. Fantastic thing. He barely stretches his neck.
Yeah.
Mm,
Mhm.
yeah, absolutely. Um, why do you guys like Ralph so much then?
He's the world's greatest detective. What do you want?
Yeah, that's true. What about you, Lamar? What
Second
makes you like
greatest
Ralph
detective.
then?
Well, third greatest if you ask Detective Chimp. But
Yeah,
but no, Dewey's right. Like, characters that stretch, they lend themselves to doing all sorts of like visual gags and stuff like that. So like this cover, like I'm looking at, like, just if you pull the cover up and look at it, and so he's like, yeah, Flash thinks he gonna get me, but I'm gonna get him because I can do this and he can't do it, right? And so like you look at this cover, I'm like, why is this dude elongated man playing in Barry face like this? Like this is, you know, and so but it immediately makes you want to read the book. Like I want to open it and see what happens because this guy looks, it's like what's going on. I mean, you know, he's stretching, but he's also contorting himself, like in Infantino actually has him doing it. I had never really seen that kind of thing before like that. It almost has like a baggy look to it, because his
Mhm.
costume is like really, really like ill-fitting, whereas Barry's is like super streamlined. So you've got all of that going on, and it made me want to read the book. And then it's like, okay, well, if he can stretch like that, like how far can he stretch? Because obviously, he's different from Plastic Man, right? Like,
Hmm.
obviously,
No, and I hate when people
um,
say they're interchangeable. I hate it. They're
they're
not the
not.
same
No,
character.
they're not interchangeable. No, no. They're definitely not interchangeable. Because they both do things that the other one doesn't. So, um, yeah, it's just, and then when you get in and read the story, and it's great because, uh, you know, um, Barry's dreaming, He's like laying down. He's wearing his costume. That's the best part about it. The whole, but you know, they're at the starting line, and then they're running, or they're there, and the next thing you know, elongated man just like that. You know what I mean? It's great. Whereas Barry's conveying his movement with the speed lines like normal, but you know Ralph is making these kind of herky jerky, like stretching movements. It's like it's interesting, but like it's like it's kind of creepy at the same time. You know what I mean? Like it makes you think, like, does it hurt when he does that, or like what's the deal? You know? But yeah, it's great. I wish that over the years they had done more with him instead of trying to kind of run away from that, which they kind of did. But yeah, I wish they wouldn't have, because there's a lot of things you can do with him, and it just, but yeah, like in this, he was great in his first appearance. Yeah, definitely.
It's interesting how you mentioned the sort of creepiness to his powers, and I think that's particularly deliberate and appropriate in that he's specifically based on an Indian rubber man, someone who is a circus attraction, or part of, I mean, this is a dated term, but, freak show kind of thing,
Yeah, yeah.
So, he's got that built into his DNA, that aspect, like.
I will say that as much, I did say Wally has the dumbest origin. I loved Ralph's origin. Like
he just really likes
just
Indian rubber
really,
men.
really likes contortionists.
Yeah.
And I found the drink that they were drinking, and I extracted the very base of it so that I can contort myself. I love Ralph. Like, I did fall in love with Ralph. I mean, I've always liked Ralph, right? But I did fall in love with Ralph reading Starman. And I really fell in love with Ralph during 52.
Yeah.
But it did get to a point where every time I see Ralph Dibny, I'm just like, it's the world famous elongated man.
Yeah. Ralph, have you noticed how, like, Sue doesn't get an introduction? It's just in the next story, Ralph appears in, she's married to Ralph, and that's it begins with their honeymoon, I think, doesn't it? Or
it's like Sue is such an integral part of Ralph's character.
Yeah.
Right.
And I guess it's appropriate. It's like she didn't need an introduction, because in a way, it's like she's always been part of the character.
She's always been there,
Yeah.
Yep. I do want to get back to that page from Alex Ross's Justice about Elongated Man and Plastic Man not needing to be members of the Justice League at the same time. This is especially ironic because Alex likes putting Captain Marvel and Superman on the Justice League at the same time.
Yeah.
So, I don't know.
Yeah. I should say as well, I really like Justice. I don't want to put anyone off reading it who hasn't read it.
Justice is great. Yeah.
Justice is great. It's just that one page.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a weird page.
So anything else to add about Ralph? Other than he's just great.
Yeah. One thing I do want to say is that I think Carmine Infantino was the perfect person to draw Ralph's first appearance. Because the way his art style works, he's really good. His line work and stuff was just like really solid, and all he really did was he extended the anatomy, right? But he didn't use a whole bunch of lines, right? Like if it's a shoulder, it's like, how a shoulder looks, how it's not supposed to look, right? And so he was like, I'm just gonna make this a little bit longer, and I'm gonna do the same thing with the torso. Whenever he bends, I'm gonna kind of do it like this, and I'm gonna put these lines here so it looks like he's bending, but not over here, and stuff like that. He was the perfect person to do that because his draftsmanship and his line work were top notch, right?
Yeah.
This is a much harder, idea to sell visually if you don't have somebody that can do that, you
Mm,
know. And so yeah, so he was, definitely the perfect person to get, Ralph's thing across, you know.
absolutely.
So
Yeah.
you know what I think hammers that point home. So of the three main stretchy characters in comics, right? Ralph Dibny, Plastic Man, and Mr. Fantastic.
Hmm.
Um, as great as Plastic Man is, as great as that comic series would eventually become as an exploration of the comics medium,
Hmm.
I don't think Jack Cole really hits his stride drawing that character until later in the run.
Yeah,
Mm,
I agree with that. Yeah.
As great and as legendary as the Fantastic Four is, I do not think Jack Kirby hits his stride with Mr. Fantastic until later in the run.
That's true.
Carmine
Yeah.
Infantino nails Plastic Man from the get go.
Yeah.
No, nails Elongated Man from the get go.
Yeah.
He
Hmm.
is drawn perfectly from that first cover.
Hmm.
absolutely. Absolutely. He's brilliant. And I wish he was used more because he's alive again in DC Comics. So where is he? You know, bring him back. So let's talk about the biggie, the final story in this upcoming collection, Flash number 123, The Flash of Two Worlds. So just to give everyone a bit of background, Flash number one in 1940 features, it is 1940, isn't it? Or 1939, around that time. It features Jay Garrick as the fastest man alive. He's smoking a cigarette and he knocks over some hard water and he becomes the fastest man alive. Um, and then his
By the
comic
way,
gets
what is hard water? Isn't that thing that like if you pour it on your sink, it turns green or something?
not hard water, I think. It's just got more what you call it, you know, what's the word? We get hard water in areas in the UK. It's just where there's
Yeah.
like a lot of limestone around the
Yeah. It's
place.
like mineral buildup.
Yeah, yeah, that's it. Yeah, yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, this thing
So
gives Jay Garrick powers. Okay.
yeah, but it gives Jay Garrick powers. Should have used a water filter, you know. And and he's the Flash, and he's great up until like towards the after World War II, the late 40s, and then you don't see him for like just under 10 years, or you don't see the Flash until Barry comes back. So there was a completely new generation of fans reading about Barry, but I would imagine there would have been still a few saying, "Oh, what happened to Jay Garrick?" And the way they explained it in Flash number 123 is that Jay Garrick exists on Earth 2 and Barry exists on Earth 1. And Barry is able to pierce the vibrational barrier between the two worlds and actually meet his predecessor, Jay Garrick. And one of the most imaginative and brilliant conceits of this story is that Jay does exist in On Earth 1 as a fictional character, which is brilliant because then it introduced the idea to the reader that Barry exists in another dimension too as a real
Hmm.
person, and we just interpret him as a fictional character, which is fantastic. So this story really kicked off the multiverse in comics, and ever since that story, in both DC and Marvel, the multiverse has been a big thing that is used to explain multiple variations of characters, and it's basically become the latest gimmick of the MCU, the Marvel movies and TV series.
Not
So my
just the
question,
MCU.
not just the MCU, yeah, yeah. I mean, like it was kind of like the basis of the last Flash movie as well,
The
and it's
2022 Oscar Award winner, Everything Everywhere All at Once.
everything everywhere.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's everywhere. It is everywhere all at once. The concept of the multiverse.
I see
So,
what you
but
did there. Good job.
yes, but it's very much a sort of double-edged sword. I mean, a lot to some people anyway. I think there's some multiversal fatigue amongst internet fandom, I think it would be fair to say.
Mhm.
So my question to you both, let's address this. Did Flash number 123, by introducing this concept into superhero lore, did it do more harm than good? Duy.
Okay, I've said many times on the show, and I'm not going to repeat it again. The multiverse is what got me into comics. And therefore, by virtue of having me, it did not do any damage. I'm kidding. But the multiverse is what got me into comics to begin with. But the ironic thing is, when it was getting me into comics, it was when they were trying to fix the concept of a multiverse because it was too confusing. We are now back to having multiverses. It is no longer too confusing, but now people are tired of it. So I don't think that the multiverse itself damaged superhero comics so much as, and I don't think what's going on right now is damaging superhero stuff like multiverses. I don't think it's damaging anything. People are getting tired of it because everybody is doing it, right? And the thing is, when everyone is doing the same thing, you kind of just go to the one thing that is doing it better than everything else. So when it comes to this stuff, I'm going to point to the Spider-Verse movies. And it's just like, I like Spider-Man No Way Home. It's fine. I enjoyed watching it on the big screen. I think it's very much a big screen movie. I don't really think I've watched it on the small screen. Compared to the Spider-Verse movies, it's not as good. And therefore, if for example, if I were ever in the mood to watch a multiverse movie with Spider-Man in it, Spider-Man No Way Home is never going to be the one I pick. Right? The Flash is never going to be the one I pick. So I might pick, the CW Crisis on Infinite Earths is never going to be the one I pick.
No.
So it's really a matter of glutting that market. That is what damages things. The basic concept doesn't damage things. The basic concept is amazing. It's amazing. And I will say, I was in college when the movie Donnie Darko came out. And Donnie Darko had a multiverse thing. And this organization of people who really like film or really like having discourse on stuff were like, had a whole thing. It's like, join our 1 hour discussion on multiverses in fiction, blah, 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 blah. And having just watched Donnie Darko, they were all like, this is such a revolutionary, innovative idea. And I was like, I've been here since 1986.
Yeah.
Right. And you're overcomplicating it with all of this stuff that whatever it is they said in Donnie Darko. I was like, two Earths vibrate at different frequencies in the same space. The parallel Earths. Okay, that's it. It's fun.
Yeah.
Enjoy it. Enjoy it. Now, if that's all you keep doing, then it's going to be annoying. I love Crisis on Infinite Earths. I didn't need a crisis every 2 years from DC Comics in the last 10 years.
Right.
Like, I loved the Infinity Gauntlet. I didn't need all of the other Infinity stuff like that came right after it. So it is, I don't think it did any damage. I think the damage is done by repetition.
Yeah. Well, what do you think, Lamar?
Yeah, I think the same thing. Because I'm one of those people that, it's like if you have a work and that work kind of stands on its own and people come and do subsequent stuff based on it, and it's not so great that it doesn't really have an effect on the original work. It's just that those works stand alone as not being very good, right? Or like if they have the pernicious influence kind of comes from that, not from the original thing. But I think that one thing we have to realize is that before this story, that concept didn't exist.
Mm.
So there was really nothing really building up to it, right? It's just, you go to get the Flash, and next thing you know, you got both Flashes on the cover, right? And that's kind of how that worked. So um you just had to dig in and read it. And then
Mm.
and the thing about this story is that there's a beginning to it, there's a middle portion, and then there's an end, right?
Mm.
So it's not really like there's no real way to drag it on. The only thing that comes later is that, the Flash is like, well, Jay Garrick's like, I'm out of retirement, so I'm gonna stay out of retirement because I got a lot of butts to kick after all, right? That's the
Mm.
only thing. And then they kind of leave it open because they're like, also, this is how you jumping in between these things and stuff, because Barry kind of he vibrates, and then he kind of
Mm.
moves back into where he's from, and so Jay's kind of like, oh yeah, I'm gonna have to remember that because I'm gonna pop in on your behind it when you least expect it, so they kind of leave that open, right? But you can just end the story right there, and it's great, you know and the way it's done now is that everything has to lead to something else. And I
Yeah.
think that's where the problem is, because why does everything have to lead to something else? I mean, story wise, we know why, corporate wise, right? We understand that. But um I think with something as vast as like multiverse stuff, it's only effective if you give it a break, right?
Mm.
Right.
Yeah, like you kind of have to. Because if you just keep hitting people with that, eventually it doesn't mean anything,
That's true.
right? And it affects the rest of the universe to the point where you create like a bottleneck. There's nowhere for you to go now, because it's like, man, we did the multiverse stuff 10 years straight. Like, you know, why would we even go back to that? Right? We've
Mm.
already done that for 10 years, right? So it kind of, it puts a chokehold on, your storytelling opportunities and things like that. So but I can't blame the Flash Two Worlds for much of anything.
Yeah.
Like I don't care what it is. I don't think I got it in me to blame anything on this story. But no, I don't think there's a pernicious influence at all coming from this story.
I I love uh I love the concept of a multiverse and how wide open to interpretation it is and the openness of the stories, right? But for example, Grant Morrison's Multiversity, I love the whole thing. I love the map of the multiverse that they made, all of that. But the ending, spoiler, when it shows that this is only multiverse one and there is
Yeah.
now a multiverse two, I get the impact. It's great. But a part of me is like, we haven't even explored this multiverse yet.
Right.
Mm. Mm. Yeah. Yeah.
Stop
Yeah.
here.
Yeah.
Hmm.
I think the problem with the multiverse is also the thing that's great about the multiverse. It's like when it's done well, it makes you care more. And
Yes,
when
Yeah.
it's done badly, it makes you care less.
Yeah.
that's
Like
true.
Flash of Two Worlds, it's like these old stories count. They're happening. And even the normal Flash stories count because they're happening in a parallel world to your own. It's like it makes you more invested somehow, just buying into that little conceit, so Flash of Two Worlds makes you care more about Barry, it makes you care more about Jay, and then ultimately it made you care more about the Justice Society and all these old stories that happened. When it's done badly, it's like, oh, I'm not even sure which variation of Wolverine I'm watching in this film. So why should
Mm,
I care whether he dies or not?
Right.
Because
Hmm.
he could be any version of Wolverine. I'm not very sure which version of Professor X this is who's getting his neck snapped by Scarlet Witch. So why should I care about him? It's it becomes like everything counts, so nothing counts. And
Yeah.
that has happened in DC Comics, and that is currently happening a little bit in Marvel movies, I think.
I remember when they were doing Spider-Verse in the comics, right?
Mm,
And then Dan Slott did that thing where he shows that the inheritors killed the spider friends,
mm.
and the internet went crazy because like, oh my god, he killed the spider friends. But I was just like, it's the multiverse.
Yeah,
There's probably like an infinite number of spider friends.
yeah. Which is great if you love the spider fence, but it's also kind of like it removes every story of its impact almost, doesn't it? You know,
Yeah.
and it
Yeah.
makes you care less. And I think that's my
Yep.
problem with Deadpool and Wolverine, and that's my problem with Multiverse of Madness. Um, it's not my problem with No Way Home
I mean,
because
but Deadpool and Wolverine isn't really about caring.
no, it's not. To be fair, to be fair. But it's
Dang.
like, oh, Hank McCoy's turned up at the end of the Marvels, and it's like, well, which Hank McCoy is this? Why should I care? Because again, with something like Flash of Two Worlds, you care about Jay, and you care about the implication that the Justice Society still exists. With the Spider Verse, every single Spider-Man variant, even the jokey ones, are important, and you'd be sad if they died. You
Yes.
know. Um, and it's yeah, even No Way Home, it's like, oh, Toby counts and Andrew still counts. That's great, that's I care.
Right.
But
I mean, that's the thing that makes No Way Home like a good movie.
yeah,
It's because of that, and like it's the only way, it's the only property where they could do that, right?
yeah,
It's
yeah,
the only
yeah,
property where they could do that because Adam West is gone, Kevin Conroy's gone, etc. So No Way Home is Spider-Man's the only character they can do that with. My
Yeah.
problem with No Way Home is I don't really think it's a good movie.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um, Everything is
Yeah,
Peter
I
Parker's
know what you
fault.
mean. I,
Like
I do
literally
enjoy
everything. I do enjoy it,
it.
but I'm like, there are so many things I could poke into this movie.
Yeah. But then you look at something like The Flash, and it's like, oh, it's a version of Michael Keaton's Batman
Yes,
who dies, but he was going to appear at the end, but then he didn't, and then it was Clooney, and it's like, why do I even care about this? I do not care. It's yeah. So I think that's the thing about Flash of Two Worlds. It's that it's the multiverse is a tool that is used to make you care more, and that's what it should be. And that is one of the many reasons why Flash of Two Worlds is so great. You know.
just to reiterate this again, in the CW Crisis on Infinite Earths, we meet Brandon Routh Superman, which is supposedly a continuation of Christopher Reeve's Superman, except he's now Kingdom Come Superman, and everyone in his world has died. And the only way to reconcile all of this is to believe that he's a different version of Christopher Reeve's Superman, because otherwise it's just depressing.
And somewhere along the line of that huge sentence that you just said, we all stop caring, right? You stop caring, I stop caring in these characters because they're not using the multiverse as a reason to make us care,
Exactly.
you know? Because, oh, there's another Christopher Reeve Superman, there's another Brandon Routh Superman out there, who cares, just this one died.
Yeah.
And I think now at the end in the DC Comics, I hope they're learning their lesson. I hope they never do, but you never know. Maybe they will, because the whole end of Absolute Power, the multiverse is closed off, and they've introduced this absolute universe, right? That's supposed to be this dark side influence universe. And the impression I get is that it's all going to be its own thing, and it's going to be these two universes being their own thing for a while, and eventually they're going to collide in some way, but they're going to make us care about them first. And I hope that's what happens.
That is the
But
impression I get too. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So let's go back to Flash of Two Worlds. What else is so great about it that makes it so great then?
I mean, the
Apart from
shape.
the Shade. Yeah, but the Thinker and the Fiddler are great as well, right? They
Look,
are brilliant as well.
I'm being cheeky because obviously I love the Shade because of Starman, and this isn't
Yeah.
really, this isn't really like him yet. But
Yeah.
it's just like given the context, this is a similar thing to what we were talking about. Given the context of Starman, where the Shade is really just fucking around with Jay Garrick. Like reading, so I've read The Flash of Two Worlds a long time ago, but way before I read Starman. And the Shade is like, this menacing, thin, gaunt figure, like looks like he's straight out of a horror movie. And then you read Starman and you find out the context for his character is like, yeah, he just really, really likes playing around with Jay. So now I'm reading Flash of Two Worlds, and I'm like, oh yeah, he's just like dicking around.
Yeah, it's funny because like my favorite panel of the two of them together is where Jay just kind of runs past him and he spins him around and he's kind of spinning, but he's leaning, right? And so
Yeah.
he's like, yeah, now see, for all the crap you was talking, that's why you spinning so fast you can't see now.
Yeah.
Like that,
It's so
you
great.
know.
The other thing is, did you notice that whenever the fiddler plays musical notes, it's bad music?
Yeah, yeah.
That's so great. I love it.
It's such a great story. It's like you said as well, Lamar, early on. It's got a beginning, it's got a middle, and it's and the end. And it's just and it's all the other stories in this collection, or most of them anyway. They're like in each issue, you'll get a Barry story, and then you'll get another Barry story, or you'll get like a Barry story and a Wally story, or Barry story and a Ralph story. But this is like a book length novel, isn't it? It fills out
Yeah.
the whole comic, so it's extra long. And it's just a great DC story. It's just fun. It's just great Flash story. It's
It
just brilliant.
it ends with Barry saying, "I'm going to tell this to Gardner Fox, who did the original Flash comics." And
Yeah,
we talk a lot about comics these days being postmodern, being meta, being all of that. So this was really well ahead of its time. It's such a good story.
it's absolutely amazing. Yeah, it's just so much fun. Like you say, yeah, that panel where the shade is getting spun around is just incredible.
I love that shit. Um, I'll tell you another thing that's great about this particular issue that we haven't talked about:
Mm.
the cover.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
It's,
This
I'll
is
say
one of the greatest
I'll
covers in
say
comics history.
No
yeah.
question. Yeah. No question.
One of the greatest and most homaged covers in the history of comics. Flash number 123, The Flash of
Yeah.
Two Worlds.
And it's literally like it's happening between seconds, right? That's what I love about this cover. It's like that girder is about to connect with that guy's head, and the Flash, Barry and Jay are zooming up in between the second where it's still falling and the second where it hits, to save him. And
Yes.
it's
And the thing
brilliant.
is, time is passing on this cover because they're talking,
Yeah, yeah,
Right.
yeah.
right? It's not a single moment in time. Time is passing on this cover.
So the cover is telling you that they're super fast. It's telling you that they save people. It's telling you that like one of them is like a new version or an unfamiliar version of the Flash that's just being introduced. It's just like you say, the way it's composed with them both separated by a wall, like it's conveying that they're both from two different worlds, just by the cover because they're both separated, but
Yeah.
also moving in the same direction.
Yeah.
It's so good.
And it's funny you mentioned that because like when I'm reading the words and the guy says Flash help me, like every time, and it's been this way since I've seen this cover, when they're both saying I'm coming, right? But when I'm reading it in my head, I'm reading them at the same time. Like it's not like I'm reading one and then going over and
Mhm.
reading the other. You know what I mean?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the other thing is, I normally dislike it when you blow up a single image from the book. and then make it a cover, but that scene only happens like really real for a really short amount of time. I do not mind it in this case because it is such a great image.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah. It's definitely they did it in the book with Ralph too. Because
Yes.
that scene is in the book too. Yeah.
Yeah, and that scene is also misleading because Barry actually catches him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And I just love that Barry's the one who discovers Earth too, and then when the Justice League start crossing over to Earth too,
Mhm.
it's almost like they acknowledge that, oh, the Flashes are the experts here. Barry's the expert with this, Barry's done this before. And again, it's that sense of curiosity, that sense of wonder, that sense of discovery. Um, yeah, it's the sense of not just resting on your laurels of having super speed, but taking it that little bit further. And that's
It's
the Flash, isn't
that
it?
is the Flash. That is you just summed up the whole character.
Yeah. So, have we got anything to add about Flash number 123 or about the Flash in general?
We went this whole time without talking about Iris.
Oh, let's talk about Iris. Yeah, let's finish off by talking about Iris. She's yeah, she plays an interesting role in this, doesn't she? Not quite Lois Lane.
I was gonna say like she becomes significantly more interesting later on, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Um, and then well, some might argue a little more complicated
yeah.
based on who she ends up being and who she ends up being descended from. Uh, but uh, was there just a rule before that like somebody had to be a reporter in a book?
Yeah, I suppose it plays a narrative purpose, doesn't it? Like that
Hmm.
she's involved in all this stuff, because she's a reporter. But mostly, she just gives Barry grief for being late. That's her role in this.
This is a precursor to the Fantastic Four, including the way women are written.
Yeah, yeah.
Hmm.
It's interesting that like you say, she doesn't get interesting till later, even though there's plenty of opportunity for her to become more interesting. Like
Hmm.
she's Wally's direct blood relation, right? But you never see her and Wally interacting,
No, she just
barely.
pawns him off to Barry.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's
And
it.
then you never see them interacting again. It's, and then of course, years later, Mark Wade makes their relationship just really important and good.
Was that Mark who did that? Because like the app, so the whole run all the way until Crisis, they never really build on Iris and Wally's relationship.
I mean, as far as I know, they don't. But
Yeah,
yeah, I feel like they don't because like Wally doesn't really have interesting parents until Mike Barron, does he?
it's true.
So they don't really go much into Wally's family life. I think there's some drama about like whether he's going to tell his parents he's Kid Flash or not at some point in the early 80s, maybe. But
Yeah, which is wrong, which is the wrong decision because one Wally's dad is a manhunter.
Yeah.
well, Rudy West is a manhunter. Bob West is just some boring guy. Like,
Yeah, I'm referencing Millennium,
yeah.
Paul's favorite event.
Oh man, it sucks.
Yeah, I
um,
think that's it. I mean, I think that's it for me regarding the
yeah,
Flash.
yeah. Have you got
Mhm.
anything to add about Iris, Lamar?
Well, one thing that I did want to point out is that when you see Iris, and this is more like the art technique that um that Infantino's using, is that when when they're like together, like there's a part in when 114 opens and they're in the car and they're driving together and they're going across the bridge or whatever and they're driving through the country and they're in the car together. Um, you know, whenever he's in these spaces with Iris like this, I know a lot of times we tend to think about like using like that wide camera angle as being something that's modern, but it's really not. Because Infantino's using it here, right? And whenever there's like this intimate interaction between between Barry and Iris, he uses it and then he goes back out again, right? And so it's just interesting. And he does it again when you get to like Captain Cold. And like there's a scene um where Barry is in front of Captain Cold and they're in the same space together, like because Barry vibrates through the ice wall and then he comes out on the other side. And when he gets out on the other side, they're kind of face to face, and he does it again, right? And then it's like so it's interesting the way that he uses like these wide camera shots and stuff for these scenes where they're in the car instead of using smaller ones. And Iris is a part of a lot of those, which is interesting to me, because when you talk about like the narrative and like we were saying, like how she's just kind of treated initially as just kind of like she doesn't even really interact with Wally, almost never. And so it's that point is just kind of driven home with the way that the pages are laid out, and it's something that kind of sticks out. It's not bad, it kind of sticks out, but it's really like when you think about the way she's treated, and she's always depicted as having these really intimate moments with Barry when they're riding in a car, they're sitting at a table somewhere, and it kind of would make you think that something else is about to happen, but it never does. And it just goes back, it's just kind of, it's not bad or good or anything. It's just something I noticed. But I'm glad that Iris evolved out of that, because, she's like one of my favorite like supporting characters, like in comics. She's one of the most important.
Iris is great. She's great.
Yeah, she's always great. Yeah.
I think as well she evolved pretty early on, not in this collection, but as soon as she marries Barry and then finds out who he is, finds out he's the Flash, I think that's where she goes to the next level then. And she does that before Lois Lane and before a lot of the other, characters that fulfill that role. Yeah. Sorry, Lamar, I think I interrupted you there. What were you going to say?
No, you didn't interrupt me. I was done. Yeah. That's a great point. Yeah.
So yeah, I think even though Iris isn't as interesting as she would become in this particular collection, it's not long before she gets better, I think. Yeah. So hopefully this has inspired some people to check out The Flash, the Human Thunderbolt, under the DC Finest line, coming out November the 26th this year. Do check it out. And if you've read any of these comics already, let us know in the comments what you think about what we've been talking about. Let us know if you buy the collection and what you thought of it. And just tell us how great you think The Flash is as well, because he is great. and click like and subscribe to the Comics Cube as well.
I have a newfound appreciation for Barry Allen.